How's it going, everybody? On the Road DFS here with another video, and it's going to be the first NFL video on my channel. And been meaning to put this one out for a little while now, so sorry about how last second this is. But all the same, you have plenty of time to watch this and maybe tweak your strategy here going into tomorrow's Sunday slate. So I did want to get this out to you here with at least a little bit of time that you could use this information. I'm going to start off with the quarterbacks here, but before I do that, if you enjoy this content, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. I am going to continue growing the channel now that we are getting the NFL season started. We should really be getting in the swing of things with this channel, and of course, I'm still going to be making those NBA preview videos as well. Cannot wait for the NBA season as well. We got a lot of DFS coming up. But without further ado, here are the quarterbacks. So at the top here, we have Patrick Mahomes. These are just the quarterbacks I targeted. I limited it down to 11 for my pool. But if you want a so these are the 11 quarterbacks that I was able to limit down in my pool. But if that's too many for your pool, you want to consolidate it a little more, then maybe just consider cutting it down based on the information provided here. I use Draft Dashboard. That is my go-to optimizer. So these are the 11 that I kind of limited it down to. But that being said, that's possibly a lot more than a lot of people want to limit it down to. So feel free to make some more cuts for yours based off this. But anyway, Patrick Mahomes at the top here. You know, it's Patrick Mahomes. You got to at least, I think, have a little exposure. Fading Mahomes entirely, in my opinion, is a very, very risky decision. Uh, I suppose it could pay off big if Cleveland goes out there and shuts them down. Cleveland's defense is actually pretty good. Of course, Myles Garrett is well known, but they made some offseason additions that I think just really strengthened their defense, both on the D line and in the secondary. So we're going to see how this goes. But the fact that it's in Kansas City, I think, plays a big role. I would have more questions if this was in Cleveland, but I think Patrick Mahomes is going to get his against Cleveland. We have a 54 and a half point total prediction for Chiefs Browns, so it's up there. I would honestly estimate that this one might go under. I I know that that might be a bold take. It might go under, but Mahomes is Mahomes. He has 10% projected ownership, so keep that in mind. That's fairly high, not the highest as we will see down here, but anyway, I don't think I need to really analyze Patrick Mahomes a whole lot, but I will say my stack suggestions: Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, and if you want to get a little contrarian, maybe you could go like Robinson or Hardman. Those are some options. And it's an interesting idea to pair Clyde Edwards-Helaire with him, but you always have to be careful pairing the running back with the quarterback because it's somewhat rare that they both have great games, but you really have to gauge it based on, is this a pass catching running back? In Clyde's case, he actually is. So something worth considering. I know he had some injury concerns coming into it, but it looks like he's good to go. So there's Patrick Mahomes. Next up, Kyler Murray. He might actually be one of my favorite on the slate. I think that this Tennessee-Arizona game is going to be a shootout. I know it says 53 projected point total, but I actually would say that I think this game will outscore the Kansas City Cleveland game. I could be wrong, obviously. I mean, anything could happen, but I heard something about 90-degree weather predicted for this Arizona Tennessee game, and in games that are 90 degrees or above, I know this is an obscure stat here, but it's like they're shootouts like almost every single time. I don't know what it is about it. If the defense somehow is more affected by the heat than the offense, I don't really know, but I could see Kyler Murray just lighting it up for the Cardinals, and he's got an 8% ownership projection, so slightly under Mahomes. Still not the lowest. I mean, 8% is, 8% is still fairly up there in total ownership, but I mean, I don't know. I like Kyler, and he should be under Mahomes a little bit. And honestly, is a better dual threat than Mahomes as well for those rushing touchdowns. You can see there 8.3 rushes average compared to 4.1 for Mahomes. But as far as stacks, obviously, you're going to have to go with. Why am I blanking for? But as far as stacks for Kyler Murray, obviously DeAndre Hopkins is someone you would want. I could see Christian Kirk there as well. And Rondale Moore, the rookie from Purdue, I think is an interesting play. Could pay off big. It could also not, but they like him and he's explosive. I mean, at Purdue, that guy was great. There's also AJ Green, who's actually ahead of Moore on the depth chart. He might be ahead of Kirk as well. I'd have to double check that. I just don't have that much faith in AJ Green, honestly, at this point in his career. He could absolutely have a solid game tomorrow. But I think for the savings, I kind of like Rondell Moore or Christian Kirk a little more than AJ Green, but that is a personal call for you. Next up, we have Josh Allen here. Buffalo, Pittsburgh, 48 projected total. I've heard a lot of experts say this is one of their favorite games to actually target the over on. Obviously, 48 is significantly lower than we saw in the Chiefs or the Cardinals game that we just were looking at. It's interesting to me because Pittsburgh traditionally has very good defense. We're expecting good defense. Watt just signed that extension. And of course, the Bills have a pretty good defense as well. Uh, we know the Bills' offense is explosive. I think there are some questions about the Steelers' offense, but I don't know. I think targeting the over is interesting, but these defenses are supposed to be pretty good. So Allen has the highest projected ownership of any of these guys. Um, that's interesting to me. I think, I mean, from a price perspective, he's slightly cheaper than Kyler, and you get a 700 savings on Mahomes. So I get it, but it's interesting. I guess this is the sweet spot. A lot of people are targeting there on Josh Allen. So Allen stack, obviously Diggs is there, Beasley is there. Um, the running backs for the Bills, I don't know what their involvement really is going to be. I would probably stay away from that. I think Emmanuel Sanders is another option as well. Um, with these stacks, I personally will not be stacking more than two. And in a lot of cases, I'll probably be stacking one. But that's your judgment again. I don't think stacking three makes very much sense. Uh, I mean, you got to just hope your guy's absolutely spreading the ball out and having a fantastic game, which can happen. But I like the odds of him having a fantastic game and one or two receivers that I pair with them also have fantastic games. I think three it's getting a little dicey there. But Aaron Rodgers is the next one here. Green Bay, New Orleans. 3% ownership on the reigning MVP projected here at 8K. That is interesting. I don't really understand it. Rodgers had a good game. I think he threw 3 touchdowns against New Orleans when they played just last season. Uh, they're going to be playing in Jacksonville. They won't be at home, but I believe that's a dome. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I like Rodgers on indoor turf fields. He traditionally does pretty well. He won a Super Bowl in Dallas on a turf field for what it's worth. So 49 projected points here, 1 point higher than the Bills versus the Steelers. And I could see these two teams kind of lighting each other up as well. We know Jameis Winston likes to go deep with the ball. What Kamara's exact role is remains to be seen, but it's safe to say he'll be highly involved. It's not the same New Orleans team that the Packers played last year. But defensively, the Saints are pretty similar. Their offense is what went through an overhaul. So, I mean, Rodgers kind of torched them last year. So, I like it, and it's practically a neutral field. I mean, it's still in the South. New Orleans, I would expect to have more fans in the stands, but Green Bay travels pretty well. Don't sleep on that. But at 3% ownership, Rodgers, I like it. The stack would be Valdez Scantling, obviously Devontae Adams, and don't sleep on two guys here. The tight end Robert Tonyan is a pretty popular target for Rodgers, especially when they get like in the red zone. Tunyon caught a good amount. I want to say 11. I'd have to fact check that. I want to say he caught 11 touchdowns from Rodgers last year. Uh, and that's pretty solid. I mean, I could see Tunyon definitely catching a touchdown, maybe two in this game. It really depends how things play out. But my second guy, Randall Cobb, he's back with the Packers. Rodgers trusts him. And trust is a big thing with Rodgers. So we will see. But old teammates reunited. I could see Cobb maybe not having like a crazy good game, but for his price, I could see him, maybe even catching a touchdown. That's really what you would want from Cobb, hopefully. So that's something you could definitely target. Next up, we have Russell Wilson. 49.5 projected total in this game, which is interesting because again, I personally feel like the defenses in this game are better than the Packers Saints. I mean, I guess actually that might not be true. The Saints defense I think is a bit underrated, and the Packers have a pretty good defense. Um, but all the same, I'm a little surprised to see this projection a little over the Packers Saints. Just a little bit over, not a lot, half a point, but 5% ownership projection on Russell Wilson, so more than Rodgers. It's a 200 savings on Rodgers. He's a full 1,000 less than Patrick Mahomes. The word on the block here is that they're going to let Wilson air it out here. And I don't think this is a bad play at all. I mean, Indianapolis has a good defense, but I think Russell Wilson is he's one of those guys that I feel like is going to get his almost every week. At 7,800, you're not paying the most for a guy that can give you elite production. It's not cheap either, but I don't know. I think it's an interesting play for sure. Indoor stadium in Indy, Lucas Oil there. The stack would be Metcalf and Lockett, I'm assuming. You could try a tight end. Gerald Everett is a starter there. And Disley, I think, is the second tight end. I don't think I'm going to Everett personally. Um, but Lockett and Metcalf, definitely. You could try them both if you wanted, but just be aware that last season they kind of were swapping who had the good game by game. Lockett and Metcalf were. The script was generally if Metcalf had a great game, Lockett didn't have a very good game, and the other way around as well. So just keep that in mind if you're planning on stacking both Seattle receivers. This might be a situation where you really have to decide one or the other. I prefer Metcalf, but he's more expensive. So just make a call depending on what works, what fits into your lineup best. Ryan Tannehill. Now, this one, not everyone might be on this one, although he does have an 8% projection, so maybe more people are on this than I thought. But I already told you guys how much I love Tennessee, Arizona. I love this game so much that I put both quarterbacks from both sides there in my lineup here, in my stack targets, I guess. 53, total points projected, 8% ownership, as I said. The stack would be A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. Um, the tight end for Tennessee right now, I'm not too familiar with. You can look that up on your own. But Julio's first game with them, there are some questions. I am expecting a pretty good game. I think people are kind of being thrown off by his new team. At the end of the day, this is Julio Jones we're talking about. Like, I know he's on a new team. I know he's older than he's ever been going into a year, obviously. Um, but this is Julio Jones. Like, the guy is a fantastic wide receiver. So I don't mind targeting Julio, honestly. And A.J. Brown, I mean, if you're playing Tannehill, obviously consider playing Brown, but he is more expensive than Julio, and I almost want to say that Julio might have a better game than AJ Brown. It's a toss up, but when you're getting savings on one of them, that's the kind of toss up you like. So that's my thought on Tannehill. Jalen Hurts, so he's got a 3% projected ownership, but all the DFS channels have been preaching Jalen Hurts. And a lot of it has to do with his dual threat ability, obviously combined with the fact that the Falcons' defense is garbage, or at least it was last year. Unless they make some major strides this year, we would expect it to be the same. Uh, Jalen Hurts at 7,600. He's a good price too. He projected 6.6 times value. That's the highest value we've seen here on the list so far. And I'm definitely going to have some exposure to Jalen Hurts. The weakness for me, okay, the weakness, quite honestly, is the stack. I'm not entirely sure who to stack Hurts with. Devontae Smith, we'll get to him later in the wide receiver section. I think that's an obvious one if if you're playing Hurts. And I think Dallas Goedert, the tight end. But then I've heard some whispers about Zach Ertz. I don't think I'm going to go there personally. And then there's the other wide receiver for the Eagles, whose name is escaping me right now. Rieger, is that it? Rieger, I think it's Rieger. Um, that those are my big three to target. Not all of them, but one or two of them. Make your choice. Hurts with Goddard, Smith, and Rieger as a three. And Scott, the running back, if you want to try it, you could, but I don't know about that. So that's Jalen Hurts. And let's see who we have next up here. Joe Burrow. Now, Burrow was one of the ones I was targeting early, right when I was researching this slate. And I still like Joe Burrow a lot. It's obviously scary because if he takes a big hit, you don't. I mean, that goes for any quarterback, but he's got the very recent and very scary injury history. So you hope Joe Burrow obviously plays the whole game. It is a risk. 47 projected point total in this game, lower than some others we've seen, but it seems like everybody's predicting that the Vikings and Bengals are going to light each other up. So, kind of an interesting lower point total projection, but um, they're going to be in Minnesota again. That's turf turf field. I do think there's something to be said for like the indoor stadiums, personally, but disregard that if you want. I feel like games tend to be higher scoring indoors, but 2% ownership in the stack. The stack for him is interesting. There's the tight end that I believe is projected at like 1% ownership, and his name it starts with an like OZ. You'll know who I'm talking about. It's the Bengals tight end, and I'm sorry for not having that right in front of me, but I did have some exposure to him just on the off chance that he somehow has a big game for them. But then outside of him, there's the three receivers, obviously. Jamar Chase, and I mean that he's had some bad headlines from the preseason, but I think he'll figure it out. Jamar Chase, and then of course there's Higgins, and then there's Boyd, and those are the big three. If you're gonna play them, I'd play two of them, and then there's also Joe Mixon. Is Mixon going to be very involved in the passing game? I don't know about that. I'd probably tend to stay away from Mixon if I'm going Burrow. Quite honestly, I don't see both of them having a good game, or at least both of them having a great game. Maybe both of them could have a good game, but your own call. But Burrow at 2% ownership should be pretty solid. Next up, Jimmy Garoppolo. I love this play. The only risk is the blowout. The Lions, 32nd ranked, dead last against QBs last year. So the matchup is there. 2% ownership, only 6,900. Game projected to score 45 and a half total, not a very big total, but also not the lowest of all these we're seeing. So my thinking with Garoppolo is if they're blowing Detroit out, he will have a good game. Because if they're just going to blow him out and then hand it off to Mostert the rest of the game, I got to think that that means Garoppolo threw at least 2 touchdowns. I got to think. Either that or Mostert just has himself an absolute game. But someone on the 49ers has to go off tomorrow. I got to think. They're finally healthy. We all know the 49ers injury story last year. Horrible. But they're healthy. They're back. Apparently, the headlines have been saying they think they're Super Bowl contenders. I think that could be a stretch, especially given their division and who they have to play 6 of their games against. Pretty tough teams. Cardinals, Rams, Seahawks. Like, are you kidding me? Any of those teams could win the division. But outside of that, I mean, that's a whole nother storyline. We're talking about the Niners, Detroit here. Sorry, not trying to get sidetracked here. I think Garoppolo is a very good play at 2%, 6.5 times projected value. Ayuk is a stack. Kittle is a pretty obvious stack as well, and Deebo Samuel. And if you want, you could try Mostert in there as well, but that gets dicey about how that's going to go. Does Garoppolo throw 2 or 3 touchdowns? They get a big lead, and then Mostert runs it the rest of the game? I don't know. Does Trey Sermon cut into Mostert in his production? That's a little up in the air. The running back situation for the Niners is a bit up in the air in terms of percentage of carries for who I don't really know. But all I know is I like the Garoppolo play. Those 2 receivers and the 1 tight end I mentioned. I would say pick 2 of the 3, roll with it. Trevor Lawrence. This is an interesting one here. 45.5 projection against Houston. Again, same projection as Detroit versus the 49ers, but he's 100 cheaper than Garoppolo. 3% ownership, so 1% projected higher ownership than Garoppolo. So that is what it is. It's a 1% difference. A lot of experts have been really liking the Lawrence play this week. It got in my ear enough that I needed some exposure to him. I don't know if I'm completely sold on it. I watched the Jags play the Saints in the preseason, and I know it's preseason, but I watched that game, and Lawrence was kind of getting tossed around. And it was first string against first string, and it was the Saints at home, and the Saints defense is pretty good. But they were kind of tossing Lawrence around. And I know Houston's defense isn't good or anything like that. It's actually pretty bad, as is their team. But I just don't know if Jacksonville is very good either. Like, obviously, they're not actually. I mean, we saw what Jacksonville was last year. So this is kind of a crapshoot, in my opinion. I don't think it's a sure thing Lawrence has a great game, but I do think it's a possibility, and you might want some Lawrence exposure because of that. And the stack would be Marvin Jones, Chenault, and Chark. I'm not sure who their tight end is these days. But James Robinson as well, but we'll get to him in a little bit, the running back. Don't know how many passes he's going to catch, though. But I would pick 2 or between 1 and 2 of those receivers I mentioned. And then our final quarterback here is going to be Sam Darnold, another guy that has had all the experts raving here that you should play coming into this week. So once again, needed a little exposure here. Against his old team, the New York Jets, there is the revenge narrative here. 45 projection here on the points, though, and that's going to be the lowest projection of anybody on my watch list for quarterbacks. So keep that in mind, but he's the cheapest, 6,500 here, 3% ownership, exactly the same as Lawrence's projected ownership. I like the revenge narrative. It's in New York, technically New Jersey, but it's at the Jets Stadium. Projection of 7.2 times value, though, which is pretty crazy. That's the highest value projection. And you just gotta hope that Darnold just performs. That's basically it. Like the biggest issue with this play is that Darnold looks the same as he did with the Jets. If you're making this play, you're just kind of counting on his situation in Carolina being a large enough upgrade from his Jet situation that that he basically hits value or more here. And I do think the Carolina situation is a lot better than the Jets situation, but that doesn't mean that Darnold has a good game here. So with that in mind, the stack I would go here is Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, the tight end Arnold for the Panthers. Apparently they have good chemistry. And if you want to run McCaffrey with him, you could do that as well. We all know McCaffrey catches passes. So those are some options. I'd say pick between one and two of those guys. All right, we're going to move on to the running backs here. The guy I just talked about, Christian McCaffrey at the top. Obviously, McCaffrey, great play. It's Christian McCaffrey against the Jets. Not a good rushing defense at all. 10-4, though. That's really the issue here for me. Is just 10-4. There's two issues for me, actually. And that is 10-4 price and 19% ownership. That is nearly 20% ownership for McCaffrey. Do you really believe in that play? Then do it, and hopefully that works out for you. But you're gonna be with about 20% of other people that also own him in most competitions. So in like honestly, in like a tournament, I think he's maybe less of a good play than in like a cash game where, if you have 20% owning him, you might just want to go ahead and do that to kind of, ride the average there. But obviously a good play. It's really the price. That's the big thing on him. Dalvin Cook. So you get a 3% ownership projection reduction on Dalvin Cook here against Cincinnati and a $1,000 savings on him as well. I think Dalvin Cook's going to go crazy on the Bengals. And honestly, I didn't include Kirk Cousins on my quarterback targets largely because I think Dalvin Cook is going to take control in this game. I mean, I could see Kirk Cousins still throwing a couple touchdowns probably, but I kind of think Dalvin Cook might go crazy on the Bengals. I really like this play, and yeah, that's basically all there is on Dalvin Cook. Derrick Henry at 19% ownership, same ownership projection as McCaffrey, which is interesting because I've been watching some videos saying that they thought Derrick Henry was going to come in at like extremely low ownership for some reason. So that's something worth watching. But this is the information we have here. So I've talked already about how much I love the Tennessee Arizona game. It's probably my favorite game to target. That's just my opinion. But Derrick Henry now, it's going to get interesting if you ran Tannehill. I don't think I'd run Henry. You could try it in a couple lineups if you were running like max entry type thing, but I don't know if Tannehill and Henry both have a good game. I don't know if that's a stack worth running, but as a standalone back, I really like Derrick Henry. Man, if that 90 plus degree heat is in Arizona, I don't know. I don't see defenders stopping Derrick Henry. If the heat alone is beating him down, wait till Derrick Henry comes rumbling through. I'm telling you. Next up, we have Alvin Kamara. The biggest knock here is that actually the defensive matchup isn't that good. The Packers' run D is actually pretty good. It's top 10 here, as you can see. He's a 300 savings on Derrick Henry, 23% projected ownership. So actually the highest projected ownership, even higher than McCaffrey and Henry. Um, I like the play because of the price savings here compared to these other. I would say like these are the elite four backs on this slate. Okay, and I love Nick Chubb too, and I'll talk about him in a minute. But I would say these are like the big four here at the very top. Like these are the elite plays. And Kamara's the cheapest of them. So that's just like something to keep in mind. He scored 2 touchdowns against the Packers last year when they played. This, of course, was with Drew Brees. But actually, I believe they were both receiving touchdowns. I don't think he ran one in. So that'll be interesting. The uncertainty about the New Orleans offense is something to consider. But, I believe that Kamara is one of those guys who's going to get his, He's like a Mahomes. They're gonna get their numbers. I really believe that about Kamara. I think he's a pretty safe play. Nick Chubb at 7-7. 4% ownership here, first of all. So you want to talk about maybe an under the radar play. Nick Chubb. I mean, nobody else on this page even has below 10% ownership. And here we get 4% on Nick Chubb, who should be heavily utilized against Kansas City. And of course, Odell Beckham Jr. is healthy again. The Browns, I believe, are fully healthy coming into this game. But all the same, their offense is heavily reliant on their rushing attack. Nick Chubb is great. The Chiefs' defense is like middle of the pack. So, I mean, I think they're literally middle of the pack, like dead middle, right? They're ranked 16th. Yeah, so Nick Chubb, I don't mind this play. I think it's a little like you feel a little less good about it than the top four, obviously. But this is the type of guy where if he goes off in a game with a higher, actually, okay, let me just say this 54.5 is the total point projection for Kansas City, Cleveland. That is higher than any of these top four guys. It's actually higher than anyone on this page right now. And you're getting the lowest ownership on it. Those two combined paint a pretty good picture. I do not mind the Nick Chubb play. I actually like the Nick Chubb play quite a lot. Combining him with Kamara could be a decent move. Two guys that they're on the pricey side of things, but they're not the priciest. So definitely consider that. And Nick Chubb does get a little involved in the passing game here and there. Not like most of the other guys, but every once in a while. Joe Mixon. I already said I wouldn't play him and Burrow earlier. I like the running backs in the Cincinnati Minnesota matchup. I think both running backs are primed for pretty big games. The the rumors and what's been reported about Cincinnati seems to be that they're going to work Burrow back pretty slowly or as slowly as they can. I still like Burrow enough to put him in my quarterback stack targets, as you already saw. But I do think that Mixon might have a heavier workload than normal, quite honestly. And his workload, when you see, he actually has the highest average rushes per game, or the third highest, excuse me. Like he rushes more times per game on average than Christian McCaffrey. Barely, but he does. He's only behind Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, the absolute workhorses there. So Joe Mixon gets a lot of carries. Minnesota's defense is not good. It might have even gotten worse. We'll have to see how that goes. But 10% ownership, though. So lower ownership than everyone but Chubb there. And then Najee Harris, again, all the headlines, all the rumors are that the Steelers are going to feed their backs. Okay, they're going to absolutely feed their running backs, running back mostly, Najee Harris, the rookie. So what it really comes down to, in my opinion, with this play is, do you think Buffalo stuffs their run? That's really it. Because I think he's going to get his rushes. Like, it sounds like the Steelers are going to feed him the ball. That doesn't mean he has a big day, though, if Buffalo, who have a decent defense, stuff him. That's really it. The Steelers' O-line concerns seem to be pretty legit. I like the play because the price isn't insane and there's potential here. I just don't know. You have to make a judgment call. Do you think that the risk that the Buffalo defense actually stops them is too high? Because that is a serious concern here. With a lot of these other guys outside of like Kamara, they're not going against good Ds. They're just not. Najee Harris is going against a decent defense, and he's a rookie. So that's just something you got to keep in mind. Next up, we have Mike Davis from the Falcons, 6,200. And this is another good game to target. I think Atlanta, Philadelphia. I don't have Matt Ryan as one of my targets. We'll see if I end up regretting that or not. But I do have Jalen Hurts, as you already saw. And Mike Davis coming in at 6% ownership. I have him in a lot of my fantasy leagues. I think he's going to be their workhorse back. I mean, for 6,200, I like the price. I like the fairly low ownership projection. I think Mike Davis is a solid play. I don't have like a whole lot to say about it really. I mean, obviously Julio Jones is out of there, Ridley's there, and they added Kyle Pitts. But I mean, I'm assuming that the run will be pretty heavily used, and Philadelphia doesn't have a very good run defense. So Mike Davis seems like a good play at 6% ownership. Raheem Mostert, we already kind of touched on this. You really got to determine what you think the game script is going to be like for Detroit, San Francisco, because if San Francisco jumps out to a big lead, Mostert will probably get a lot of carries. But then the second thing you have to consider, again, already mentioned this, Trey Sermon. Even if it's a blowout, it is not a sure thing that Mostert gets all those carries down the stretch. In fact, I think it's virtually a guarantee that Sermon takes a decent amount of them. So I like the Mostert play. I just feel like there are like two main variables there, and that being, is it a blowout, and is Mostert getting most of the carries? If the answer to both those things are yes, then I think Mostert makes an outstanding play at 6,100. Although I will say the 11% ownership is kind of high for a guy in this salary range, but that's because people are onto this. The thing is, if this busts, if it's not a blowout, if Sermon's taking most of the carries, then those 11% of lineups could be in for some trouble. But I like the play overall. I don't want to scare you off it. I just want to make you very aware that there are some variables in play that could hurt Mostert. Next up, we have James Robinson at 9% ownership. One of my favorite plays on the whole slate, quite honestly. I think at 5,900, that's mega value. We know ETN got injured, the rookie back from Clemson for Jacksonville. Robinson should get a lot of carries. Last year, he carried my fantasy team to a championship, got him off waivers last year, ended up being insane. The thing is, I've heard talk that Carlos Hyde will get like the carries inside the five, basically. I don't know if that's totally true. I mean, Urban Meyer, Hyde's old coach at OSU, I just don't know. I could see it. I mean, Hyde's a physical runner. I could see him maybe taking touchdowns away from Robinson, but it doesn't really concern me enough to get scared at 5'9", taking a chance on this guy. And there's no saying. Robinson could be scoring the touchdowns himself. I don't think Hyde's very good. I don't even think Urban Meyer can try to trick himself into thinking that Hyde is great at this point in his career. So I love the James Robinson play. And lastly, we have Tevin Coleman for the Jets. Now, this is interesting because the Jets are going to have running back committee here, but Coleman is the listed starter. There have been some injuries to those around him. I think, what's his name, Michael Carter, the other running back, uh, I believe that he had some injury issues, and it maybe kind of like solidified Coleman's place as the starter. He's going to be under 1% owned according to this projection, and he's their starting running back. I just feel like that's a chance worth taking, at least here and there. If you're doing like a max entry strategy, definitely. I think this is a tournament play. I do not trust it for cash, but Tevin Coleman, I could definitely see him, picking up a TD or two here for sure if the Jets offense can move, which is not a guaranteed thing. But this is just the last one I wanted to include here for 5,400. Pretty cheap there on Tevin Coleman. All right, the wide receivers, Davante Adams at the top. You know what it is. Davante Adams, if you're running the Rodgers stack, of course you play him, but I think you strongly consider playing him even if you're not running Rodgers. I mean, Davante Adams is going to get his targets. We know he's going to get his targets. He always does. Should be able to run his routes extra clean, indoor stadium. Only knock 18% ownership. Pretty high ownership there, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. If you, in your lineup build, whether you have Rodgers or not, if you have 8,600 to throw at Devontae Adams and it makes sense, I say absolutely go for it. I do think that paying up that extra 100 for Devontae over Tyreek Hill is a good call. If you're wondering about that, I absolutely do. But that brings us to Tyreek Hill, this next guy. I like the play, 14% ownership. I don't love the play. I think Cleveland's defense is improved. Tyreek's that guy that, usually scores at least a touchdown on some crazy Hail Mary type stuff. We know he's a speedster, super talented. I just feel like, I guess I would view Tyreek Hill as more of a tournament play, and I would view Devontae Adams as more of a cash play just because of the consistency. I know they're both fairly consistent, but Tyreek Hill, I feel like, is that type of guy that either like blows up or maybe just has like 4 catches for 30 yards or something. Devontae Adams, it seems like, just like doesn't go under 100 yards. Like straight up, like he's going to be your consistent guy. We'll probably get a touchdown or two per game. Really like I really like both of those plays. I just think one's a bit riskier, and paying that extra 100 makes sense. DeAndre Hopkins, love it for the Murray stack, but I love it in general. I said it before, I'll say it again 1,000 times. I love targeting the Arizona-Tennessee game. 16% ownership, a little higher than Tyreek Hill, actually, but I like it. I think he'll score at least one touchdown. Tennessee's defense against the pass is really bad, 27th. Hopkins should have his way against that Tennessee secondary. Calvin Ridley against Philadelphia. Philadelphia's D again is not great. It's not the worst. It's definitely not the worst. It's like about middle of the pack, maybe a little under middle of the pack. But with Julio gone, Matt Ryan, I think, is just going to really have to target Kyle Pitts and, of course, Ridley as his two main targets here. So that's just how I see it. I mean, 16% ownership seems a tad bit high, quite honestly. Like, I think he's a lot riskier than these other receivers we're seeing come in with that high of ownership. But I mean, again, had him on my fantasy team last year. Ridley was great, but he was playing with Julio on the other side. So let's see how this goes with him alone there. Stephon Diggs here. Steelers secondary is actually very good, second ranked here. This is last year, but I view Diggs similarly to how I view Devontae Adams. I feel like he's going to get his targets, and that's kind of all you can ask for. He's got 10.4 average targets per game. Devontae Adams has 10.6. Those are the two highest here. Diggs is going to get his targets and he's going to get his catches. And he is the lowest percentage owned at 15% of everyone we've talked about so far except Tyreek Hill. I really like that. I really like the savings as well. You're getting a 700 savings from Devontae Adams. I view Devontae and Diggs as just two guys that are just target machines, and that's why I really like Diggs at the 7.9 price, even though the Pittsburgh defense is a lot better than any of the defenses we've talked about so far against these receivers. Brandon Ayuk is one I like. I mean, you got to like it. It's against Detroit. I said I love it with the Garoppolo stack if you want to go there. And here's what I really love, 3% ownership. Yeah, that is where it's at for a guy going against Detroit's 32nd rated defense against the pass. That is outstanding. I mean, there's nothing really to dislike about that, except if Debo Samuel and Kittle take all the passes. I mean, that's really I think the only way Ayuk doesn't have a good game is if he's just not the one being targeted, quite honestly, or he's being locked down when he is targeted. I guess and I just don't see that happening against Detroit. There's no team that you could take a better chance against not locking him up than Detroit. Brandon Cooks here against Jacksonville. This is a 31st rated defense against the pass. So the Lions just a little worse, but Cooks is going to be the main target for the Texans. No, the Texans are not a good team to target overall, but I see Cooks getting a lot of targets. I just don't see any way around this. And Jacksonville's secondary is trash. That just is what it is. The Texans are trash as well. I think I called this matchup a crapshoot earlier. It is a crapshoot, but there are going to be some hidden gems in the crapshoot. And at 2% ownership, I think Cooks, especially in tournaments, is somebody worth having some exposure to for sure. Here's Deebo Samuel, just mentioned him. Same thing I said about Ayuk. It's the same risks as well. You play Deebo Samuel, well, what if Kittle and Ayuk get all the targets? His ownership's projected at 8%, so actually higher than Ayuk. But Deebo is a great player, you know. It's really kind of a toss-up, I think, whether Ayuk or Debo have a better game. If you're running the Garoppolo stack, you consider playing them both for sure. But in that case, don't play Kittle. I would not play all three. But that's just my advice on that. At 63 or 6,300, excuse me, salary. Yeah, I like the Deebo Samuel play against Detroit. Robbie Anderson, he has 7% projected ownership, 6,200 against the Jets. Him and Darnold both have that revenge narrative. It's interesting to me. It's interesting these 7%. That's a little higher than I would expect. I think people are actually kind of on to this Carolina stack for this slate. That's kind of the feeling I'm getting. It seems like a lot of people are really feeling this Carolina stack, and I get it. It is good value, and you could definitely go there if you want to, but I guess that would be my big prediction here is that tomorrow we're going to see higher Carolina ownership than you might actually expect. I feel like there's so many people thinking that they're pulling a quick one with this Carolina thing that the ownership's actually going to be a lot higher than anyone's expecting. It's going to be like everyone thinks they're pulling a quick one, so no one's pulling a quick one, like that type of thing. Anyway, Cincinnati, Minnesota next up with T. Higgins. I mean, if Burrow has a great game, I'll just lump this with Boyd here. Let's just do them both. If Burrow has a great game against Minnesota, which he very well might, I think these two teams are going to light each other up, similar to Tennessee, Arizona. Boyd and Higgins should have good games. I don't have. Why am I blanking on the name? I don't have Chase on here, but he's another one you could consider. I just didn't think he needed to be on this list. Those are the big three wide receivers if you want to do a Bengals stack. And 5% owned and 4% owned on Boyd and Higgins. I think one of them will have a good game at least. Take your pick, getting them at pretty low ownership. I like it. Michael Pittman Jr. Now, Paris Campbell was looking like he wasn't going to play earlier in the week. I'm pretty sure because I was hearing all these rumors. Michael Pittman Jr. is going to be the number one receiver for the Colts on Sunday, and maybe he still is. I don't know if I misunderstood and Paris Campbell was fine the whole time. I'm pretty sure he had injury issues for sure, but Paris Campbell is good to go. So I don't know if Pittman's as strong of a play. I think he's still a pretty good play, but it's just like Paris Campbell is okay combined with the fact that the Colts, quite honestly, don't really pass a ton unless they change under Carson Wentz. But they usually focus on the run. So I'm not trying to like downplay this completely. There's a reason I put it here. He's at 3% ownership, and Pittman seems pretty poised for a breakout year. Um, I just don't know if it's my favorite play on this list, but do your research on this and figure out if you like Pittman. It's a run first offense in Indy, so just keep that in mind. Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner here, he's going to be the Eagles' number one receiver. He's priced at 5,300, 2% projected ownership against the 29th rated pass defense in the NFL. That kind of tells you all you need to know. There's not anything really to not like aside from the fact that they're playing away in Atlanta. I don't know why his price is so low. I mean, I guess I get it. He's a rookie, but man, I think this is insane value at 5,300. Marquez Callaway, this is a popular play here. He should be the number one receiver for New Orleans against Green Bay. Yeah, 7% ownership. You can see it. It's already taking place here. Projected ownership. He's 100 cheaper than Pittman or Smith. Uh, the downside is just that like the Packers secondary is pretty decent, but I would say Jameis Winston should air it out at least a few times. Him Callaway I mentioned I watched that Jaguars Saints preseason game. Callaway caught two deep touchdowns from Jameis Winston very early in that game, and then they just sat Winston the rest of the game, obviously because it's preseason. But it seemed like good chemistry was being developed there. But the Packers secondary and the Jaguars secondary are not the same. Do not get it twisted. And that was preseason. I mean, it was first team against first team, but I think you got to keep that in mind. Christian Kirk, this is mostly if you play a Murray stack. And I wanted to put him here just because it's a good matchup. You could consider playing Kirk if you don't have a Murray stack, just as like a value guy. You could definitely think about it. Callaway and him are the same price, and I would say one of the two or both will have a great game, honestly. But just make your call. As you see with the 2% projected ownership, seems like most people being faced with this decision are going towards Callaway. So to be a bit contrarian here, you could go to Christian Kirk and just hope for a blow-up game. It's just with A.J. Green there and Rondale Moore there, I'm not really sure which Arizona receivers are going to have a great game. I feel like at least two of the four have to. But you can just hope it's Christian Kirk here, and I would definitely not fault you for that at all. I think he's got a lot of potential going into this game. Next up, we have the tight ends. This is going to be the final position we talk about. The defense is kind of up to you. Make your own call. You can see the rankings. I'm tending to go cheap on the defense. I'll leave it at that. But Travis Kelce is the top tight end, of course, against Cleveland. You know, he grew up in Cleveland, so a bit of a personal matchup here for him. If you let that kind of thing factor into your decisions, 19% ownership. He's just expensive. That's it. We know what Kelce brings to the table. He's great. I mean, he has almost 10 target average per game. That's a lot more than anyone else on this list. 19% value, or excuse me, ownership though is pretty high there. And then you go to Kittle here, and Kittle is at 7,000. So you save 1,500. He's still targeted about 8 times a game and 10% less ownership, sitting at 9% projected ownership. This is why I like the Kittle play. If you're running the Garoppolo stack, I definitely like the Kittle play, but you could totally get away with it even without Garoppolo. I think I think Kittle is a great play, honestly. I like Kelce as well. It's just the price and the ownership. It paints a pretty clear picture. And on top of that, Kelsey's going against the Cleveland Browns defense. Decent. George Kittle is going against the Detroit Lions defense. Bad. Just straight up bad. Actually, literally the worst. So just keep that in mind. Kyle Pitts here, the rookie tight end from Florida. He's with the Falcons now. 6,000. You save another 1,000 on George Kittle. He's at 9% ownership, so the same ownership as Kittle. We just don't know what exactly we're going to get because he's a rookie. That's like the biggest knock on him. You figure he's going to be highly involved in the Falcons passing game. I mean, him and Ridley figure to be the top two targets. Of course, there's Gage there too, the other receiver for the Falcons. But I like the Kyle Pitts play a lot. The biggest knock on this play is he's a rookie, and the Philly defense is like middle of the pack. That's about it. And also, I guess you could make an argument that 9% ownership is a bit high for like a rookie, but that's all I really have on Pitts. It could be a great play. It could be a really bad play potentially. That's a pretty high risk play that I'd maybe opt more in tournaments for. Next up, Dallas Goedert. If you're running the Jalen Hurts stack, I love it. I think you can get away with it even without it though. 3% ownership, excellent. About 6 targets a game, not bad. The big question with him is just like him and Ertz, like Zach Ertz. Like, do they How are they splitting this right now? I mean, we know Goddard's the tight end one, but I don't know. It's a little up in the air, but I like the Goddard play at 5'9" for sure. Then at 5'7", we have Hawkinson. Uh, Here's a situation. The Lions should be throwing it a lot, so you like that for him, especially if they're trailing here. The Niners defense is very good. It's a top defense, and the ownership at 7% is a bit high, like compared to what you'd like to see here on Hawkinson. So you can play him. I think the biggest factor in playing him should be the fact that you think the Lions are going to be trailing and throwing a lot. But I don't know. The ownership is a bit higher than I would like, and the 49ers defense is very good. Next up, Logan Thomas. It seems like all the DFS channels love him against the Chargers. Uh, he played very well last year. His ownership at 6% is lower than Hawkinson's, higher than Goddard's. Uh, he's definitely a play I like at 5'6". I think he's in a pretty nice sweet spot in terms of salary there. And then finally here, we have Robert Tonyan. And then we have Robert Tonyan from the Packers, who I already mentioned with Rodgers. If you're running the Rodgers stack, absolutely, but maybe consider playing him even without the Rodgers stack because he catches touchdowns from Aaron Rodgers, and he's got 2% projected ownership. That's really all you need to know. The Saints' defense is good, but Tonyan is a red zone target that Rodgers seems to love. Finally, here to wrap this up, Eric Ebron, the tight end for Pittsburgh. The thing here is he's 1% projected ownership, and at 5,200 is pretty cheap. This is kind of like a value money thing here with him. I think Ebron, the price is right. There is a chance he catches a touchdown for sure, and you just play him and you hope for the best. Finally, here, Kyle Rudolph. Evan Ingram is injured for the Giants at 4,500. You love that price on Rudolph. On top of that, Denver's defense not very good. Under 1% projected ownership. This is a value play I really like with Kyle Rudolph. He's been a decent tight end. I think he's dealt with some injuries in his career, but Rudolph is definitely no slouch at all. And yeah, that's basically it on Kyle Rudolph. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of On the Road DFS. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to bringing you more both NFL and NBA DFS content in the future. Please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and I will be back before you know it.